Welcome back to The Weakest Explorer. Today, Rowan and his wonderfully underqualified party are about to discover that the pair depart with enormous confidence and bargain bin equipment. Establish the location, time, and emotional temperature before the immediate action. If their confidence looks suspiciously larger than their qualifications, that is because nobody has learned anything from the last disaster. Let us get into it. And we begin with morning light reveals Bramblegate's south gate and the road toward Dawnwell dungeon. Naturally, Rowan arrives under an overstuffed pack with a dented pan and rope dangling from it. To nobody's surprise, Liora waits in patched novice robes, gripping her cheap life magic staff with both hands. Here comes they compare bargain bin supplies and discover Rowan bought 6 lunches but no antidote. That would be manageable, except Liora quietly produces the antidote she packed for both of them. Then the dungeon adds, Rowan praises her preparation with shamelessly excessive admiration. Our heroes respond with Liora blushes while tightening the strap across Rowan's overloaded pack. For one beautiful second, the strap snaps and buries Rowan beneath bedrolls, pans, and lunches. Unfortunately, passing adventurers laugh at the weakest-looking party leaving town. This is where Liora nearly retreats when she recognizes members of her former party in the crowd. Against all professional advice, Rowan stands and loudly declares that competent people are boring anyway. Somehow, he offers Liora his hand without acknowledging the cabbage stuck to his head. The important part is Liora takes his hand and steps beyond the gate despite her shaking knees. And yes, the two novices walk toward Dawnwell as Bramblegate recedes behind them, which leaves us with a distant dungeon entrance waits beneath the wooded hills like an open mouth. And we begin with the pair enter Dawnwell's beginner floor beneath cheerful guild safety signs. Naturally, Rowan confidently chooses the corridor marked with a faded left-pointing arrow. To nobody's surprise, Liora notices the arrow is actually moss growing over a warning symbol. Here comes they return to the same carved frog statue for the 3rd time. That would be manageable, except Rowan insists the statue moved instead of admitting they are lost. Then the dungeon adds a harmless cave moth bursts from the ceiling and Liora screams. Our heroes respond with her flinch knocks an uncorked mana tonic from Rowan's hand. For one beautiful second, the tonic splashes across the floor and attracts a swarm of glowing beetles. Unfortunately, Rowan attempts a heroic retreat and slips in his own spilled potion. This is where Liora catches him by the belt before his face meets the stone. Against all professional advice, they freeze in an awkward pose while the beetles crawl harmlessly past. Somehow, Rowan complements the rescue angle. Liora drops him immediately. The important part is a distant wet slapping sound finally silences their argument. And yes, they raise staff and rusty knife toward the dark passage, which leaves us with a small green slime rounds the corner and both novices react like a dragon arrived. And we begin with the slime quivers beneath luminous moss while the novices hold their ground. Naturally, Liora tries to form cleansing light, but fear breaks the spell circle. To nobody's surprise, the slime springs and Rowan shoves Liora aside. Here comes acid grazes Rowan's sleeve and eats through the cheap cloth. That would be manageable, except Rowan slashes with his rusty knife and the blade bounces off the slime core. Then the dungeon adds the slime absorbs the knife, leaving Rowan weaponless. Our heroes respond with Liora apologizes while desperately rebuilding her spell. For one beautiful second, Rowan searches his pack for anything heavy enough to matter. Unfortunately, he lifts the entire overloaded pack above his head. This is where the slime lunges as Rowan drops every supply they own onto it. Against all professional advice, the pack crushes the slime flat with a wet, explosive splat. Somehow, Rowan poses over the wreckage and names the maneuver. The important part is the dissolved pack leaks 6 flattened lunches across the floor. And yes, Liora laughs despite herself, then covers her mouth in surprise. Which leaves us with a second slime descends behind Rowan while he celebrates. And we begin with Rowan turns and finds the second slime already airborne. Naturally, Liora freezes as the creature blocks the corridor out. To nobody's surprise, Rowan raises the ruined pack as a shield despite his burned arm. Here comes the slime's acid tears through the last layer of leather. That would be manageable, except Liora sees Rowan protecting her while blood runs down his wrist. Then the dungeon adds she remembers her former party calling her useless whenever she hesitated. Our heroes respond with Liora plants her staff even though her knees continue shaking. For one beautiful second, a clean life magic circle finally forms beneath the slime. Unfortunately, the creature leaps toward Rowan before the spell is complete. This is where Liora steps between them and releases cleansing light at point-blank range. Against all professional advice, white gold magic burns the slime away without touching Rowan. Somehow, Liora remains standing, stunned by her own success. The important part is Rowan celebrates her victory louder than the situation requires. And yes, Liora heals his arm while trying to hide a delighted smile, which leaves us with their hands linger together after the wound closes. And we begin with a side nook reveals a familiar scarred treasure chest surrounded by old bite marks. Naturally, Rowan's eyes shine with immediate and completely unjustified hope. To nobody's surprise, Liora recognizes the chest from Rowan's many mimic injury stories. Here comes the scarred lid subtly opens to watch Rowan approach. That would be manageable, except Liora grabs the back of Rowan's tunic before he can touch it. Then the dungeon adds Rowan argues that repeated betrayal can eventually become friendship. Our heroes respond with the mimic sprouts teeth while Rowan is still defending it. For one beautiful second, Liora drags Rowan backward as the jaws snap shut inches from him. Unfortunately, the mimic charges on tiny clawed feet through the treasure nook. This is where Rowan throws a flattened lunch into its open mouth. Against all professional advice, the mimic pauses, chews, and looks offended by the cooking. Somehow, Liora strikes its tongue with cleansing light. The important part is the creature flees into a crack, leaving a small brass dungeon token behind. And yes, Rowan pockets the token and calls the encounter successful diplomacy, which leaves us with Liora makes him promise not to pet any more furniture. And we begin with Beyond the Treasure Nook. A broken stairwell descends into colder darkness. Naturally, Rowan spots fresh claw marks carved through stone beside the beginner route. To nobody's surprise, he kneels to compare the track with his hand and finds it twice as wide. Here comes Liora notices black ash caught in the deepest groove. That would be manageable, except a guild marker nearby has been deliberately knocked face down. Then the dungeon adds Rowan identifies the print as a large canine predator rather than a dungeon slime. Our heroes respond with Liora argues they should report the danger immediately. For one beautiful second, a faint wounded whine rises from below the collapsed steps. Unfortunately, Rowan hears pain rather than aggression and peers into the gap. This is where Liora warns that wounded beasts are more dangerous, not less. Against all professional advice, they discover drops of dark blood leading toward the old cistern. Somehow, Rowan ties a guide rope around both their waists before descending. The important part is Liora checks the knot and realizes he has tied them uncomfortably close. And yes, Rowan makes one shameless comment and receives a staff against his ribs, which leaves us with they follow the blood trail as a low growl replaces the whining. And we begin with the collapsed cistern opens around a pool beneath cracked stone arches. Naturally, a huge ash wolf lies trapped beneath a broken iron grate. To nobody's surprise, a black-fletched hunter's bolt protrudes from its rear leg. Here comes Liora realizes someone drove the predator onto the beginner floor. That would be manageable, except Rowan approaches slowly with empty hands visible. Then the dungeon adds the grate shifts and the wounded wolf tears itself free. Our heroes respond with ash erupts from its coat as it charges the nearest human. For one beautiful second, Rowan braces with a broken plank that shatters on impact. Unfortunately, the wolf hurls Rowan across the cistern into a stone pillar. This is where Liora's first binding spell collapses when the beast turns toward her. Against all professional advice, Rowan tries to stand, but his injured leg refuses to hold him. Somehow, the ash wolf circles between the pair, bleeding and frantic. The important part is Liora sees the bolt wound and understands pain is driving the attack. And yes, the wolf lowers itself for a final leap at Rowan, which leaves us with a fallen wall opens a narrow escape passage beside Liora. And we begin with Liora reaches the narrow passage while the wolf stalks the injured Rowan. Naturally, the gap is wide enough for Liora, but too narrow to drag Rowan through quickly. To nobody's surprise, Rowan orders her to leave and bring help. Here comes Liora, takes one step into safety, trembling violently. That would be manageable, except she remembers her old party abandoning wounded beginners to preserve their rank. Then the dungeon adds Rowan crawls between Liora and the wolf instead of toward the exit. Our heroes respond with, he raises a loose cistern tile as the world's least convincing shield. For one beautiful second, the wolf swipes the tile away and opens a cut across Rowan's shoulder. Unfortunately, Liora turns back despite every instinct screaming at her to run. This is where she plants herself behind Rowan and begins a healing incantation. Against all professional advice, Rowan asks why she returned while keeping his eyes on the wolf. Somehow, Liora says parties do not abandon each other. The important part is, Rowan admits he finally found a party worth being terrified for. And yes, the ash wolf charges through a cloud of its own burning ash, which leaves us with Rowan and Liora braced together with no strength left to spare. And we begin with Leora's life magic closes Rowan's shoulder wound while the wolf advances. Naturally, her tears fall onto the glowing spell circle without breaking it. To nobody's surprise, Rowan notices the old sluice chain hanging above the wolf's path. Here comes, he asks Liora to keep healing while he works out a terrible plan. That would be manageable, except the wolf's ash cloud makes Liora cough and weakens her concentration. Then the dungeon adds she admits aloud that she is still terrified. Our heroes respond with, Rowan answers that fear means both of them are finally paying attention. For one beautiful second, Liora laughs once through her tears and stabilizes the spell. Unfortunately, the healed muscles in Rowan's leg begin responding again. This is where Liora shifts from healing to a thin cleansing barrier. Against all professional advice, the barrier parts the ash cloud and exposes the wounded rear leg. Somehow, Rowan spots the wolf avoiding one cracked section of floor. The important part is, Liora recognizes running water beneath those stones. And yes, they exchange a look and understand the same trap, which leaves us with Rowan rises with Liora supporting his weight against her shoulder. And we begin with Rowan limps toward the cracked sluice stones and deliberately draws the wolf after him. Naturally, Liora keeps the cleansing barrier between Rowan and the ash cloud. To nobody's surprise, Rowan throws the brass mimic token past the wolf to turn its head. Here comes, the wolf lunges and places its healthy forelegs on the weakened floor. That would be manageable, except Liora strikes the overhead chain with concentrated cleansing light. Then the dungeon adds the rusted chain snaps and releases the ancient sluice gate. Our heroes respond with water bursts beneath the cracked stones and collapses the wolf's footing. For one beautiful second, the current sweeps the ash wolf into a recessed maintenance channel. Unfortunately, Rowan drops the iron grate across the channel before it can climb out. This is where the trapped wolf snarls, then collapses from exhaustion rather than attacking. Against all professional advice, Liora cautiously removes the hunter's bolt through the grate. Somehow, Rowan binds the wound using the last clean strip of his shirt. The important part is, the ash wolf stops growling and watches the pair with wary golden eyes. And yes, Rowan declares a tactical victory while standing in filthy, waist-deep water, which leaves us with Liora laughs so hard she has to lean against him. And we begin with, behind the open sluice, Rowan discovers an Elendrian alcove carved with linked circles. Naturally, the silent system window identifies Liora as an eligible follower. To nobody's surprise, a second window presents soul binding as a permanent voluntary bond. Here comes, Rowan's excitement disappears when he reads that the bond touches the soul. That would be manageable, except Liora notices his expression and asks what the ancient circles mean. Then the dungeon adds, Rowan describes the visible rite without revealing the hidden system window. Our heroes respond with, he tells her the rite offers a permanent soul bond entered only by mutual consent. For one beautiful second, Liora asks whether the bond could let him command her. Unfortunately, the silent system provides no answer, and Rowan refuses to invent one. This is where he explains every known condition while carefully hiding that followers fuel his private system. Against all professional advice, Rowan tells her not to answer while frightened or grateful. Somehow, he turns away from the ritual circle so she feels no pressure from him. The important part is, Liora studies the man who stayed when escape was possible. And yes, she asks what Rowan expects from her if she accepts. Which leaves us with, Rowan asks only that they never abandon or own one another. And we begin with Liora steps into the linked circle ritual while Rowan remains outside it. Naturally, she says Rowan never treated her fear as proof she was useless. To nobody's surprise, Liora remembers his free clinic injuries, terrible jokes, and stubborn kindness. Here comes, she admits she was already choosing him before the system offered anything. That would be manageable, except Rowan asks one final time whether she is certain. Then the dungeon adds Liora takes his scarred hand and answers without looking away. Our heroes respond with the circles ignite like a dark red brand beneath their joined hands. For one beautiful second, a subtle linked ring mark burns into Liora's skin and quickly fades to a scar. Unfortunately, their senses overlap for one breath: her fear, his loneliness, and mutual trust. This is where Rowan staggers from the intimacy of emotions that were never spoken. Against all professional advice, Liora blushes when she realizes he felt the depth of her affection. Somehow, the system recognizes Liora as Rowan's first follower. The important part is a second point appears because their existing trust already crossed a threshold. And yes, Rowan purchases appraisal and sees their painfully low beginner statistics. Which leaves us with a final hidden line identifies an unknown observer tracking the new bond. And that is where we leave them today, alive, technically successful, and already standing much too close to the next problem. If you enjoyed the episode, like the video, subscribe, and come back for the next chapter of The Weakest Explorer.